Last time I was sellotaping. Oh, that's 0 by 5. Okay. Can you hear me now? Just give me a hello. I think I'm good. Last time I was sellotaping. Oh, that's 0 by 5. Okay. Can you hear me now? Just give me a hello. Okay. Finally, tech sorted. I've muted myself on the actual stream I have a mic and we're good. Okay. That was good actually, because the first minute there, I was kind of rambling. I was like, what am I even, because I was like, wait, what am I streaming about? What's the crack? And I kind of in the last minute just basically kind of worked out what I'm trying to say or what I'm doing. So it kind of makes sense now. And also, as a lesson for future, have batteries in your mic. I learned that last time. Turn your mic on, mute your stream, and when you do a 5 by 5, check the chat to see everybody's there. I hope you're all well, lads. And I am treating myself to a bit of a I'm on delay. Bit of a drink, just to take it easy. You know, it's a weird period of time we're having right now. It's kind of slightly stressful, I find. I was just talking to someone else earlier about this, and we were both kind of agreeing that we both happen to feel like, well, I've got a good resilience. You know, I'm a bit of a bit of a house cat, kind of, you know, bit of a home bird, home dog, and so you know what, I can take this. I'm resilient enough. And personally, anyway, I felt just a little bit. It was like a couple of days ago. I was like cooking something to eat, and I just got this weird kind of sense of not dread or not anxiety, a kind of hint of each. Just a kind of it's been going for weeks now, and the entire world is dominated by it, and the future is kind of uncertain, and it's all of that, and it's not like a freak out or a meltdown. It's just going from completely fine, you know, solid on this, to just a little bit like, you know, I just got this weird feeling in my stomach. I'm not trying to be macho or anything, but it was just for like 10 minutes. I don't know, whatever mood came over me. So it does actually have an effect on you. So I think it's good. Someone, Simon Hayes just said he's pulled open a can of Guinness, and I'm not trying to turn everybody into an alcoholic either. You know, if you're not into drinking, just throw in a cup of tea and I grab a bun or something. So what do I actually want to talk about? Basically several things. As you can see on screen here, I'll put myself on full for a sec, but I've just got basically a bunch of tabs open, things that have been kind of interesting me. They're not in exact order. They're kind of one leads to the other and back again or whatever. Just my thoughts for a few days. I didn't go live for a few days. To be honest, the reason was one night StreamYard didn't work. It was something to do with bandwidth. As in, it wasn't my fault for once. And also, I don't know, I got a bit, not stage Friday, but I was like, oh, what'll I talk about tonight? It's not worth it or whatever. But it actually, these days, it is worth it just to, why not, basically. But anyway, I feel like I wish I had 4 sets of eyes so I could read the chat the whole time. And Kevin Murphy says, when I heard of Italy's death rate, I started to feel dread. Well, so to get to my point, I want to open up on some of these things, like, instead of just talking about death rate and COVID-19 and I will be talking about that, but not strictly about the daily churn about the illness, the worldometer numbers. We can touch on those, but that's not all I want to focus on. I want to zoom out a little bit and think about all of this. And it's something I've harped on a bit already. You can say I'm repeating myself, but you know, conspiracy theory side of it versus the standard, reasonable Occam's razor narrative, official narrative, you could say, between those two things and that competing question, you could say, oh, you mentioned that one night and you mentioned it a different night as well. But no, I feel like you couldn't think enough about this. There's not enough, I don't have enough space in my mind to process all of the kind of thoughts that one could have on this. I feel like it needs to be done by a lot of people. There was a video by Morgoth, which basically was talking about the competing roots and branches of narrative on all this. Everyone's got a different one. A Chinese bioweapon, a this, a that, including just the standard narrative. Fair enough. Yeah, the last Trugale says we need to talk about the blinder question. I'm going to be talking about that soon. That is on the agenda. It's about 2 or 3 things that I want to talk about. Basically, Corona, narratives and all that stuff. The blinder question, the BQ, and then a few other random bits. I might even not do those. So what was I saying? all of these different narratives. That was Morgoth's take, and he was kind of saying, Morgoth's review, by the way, that's his channel on YouTube, very good. But his kind of conclusion was, you just need to have the ability to say, I don't know. It's a really simple proposition by him, but it makes complete sense. Just to say, listen, there's so much going on. This is a global spanning thing with all sorts of things going on. To be honest, and it's just hitting me now, but really anybody in this debate, and I'm open to hear anything, but anybody who kind of says, anybody who's unwilling to say or kind of be strongly put forth that they ultimately don't know. You can give your theory and give your evidence, and I'm reading this and I'm reading that, my mind's changed, my whatever, but just ultimately your thing to be like, at the end of your spiel or at the end of your thing is just to be like, ultimately, I don't know. How could I possibly know? And I feel like anything less than that is a little bit suspect, because it's like, hey, how could you know? I mean, we're all just playing with it here. Little chat check. Everyone's well. So yeah, I want to go through that. Then I want to look at the blinder question, which is, I'll explain that in a while. It's to do with Irish media treatment of the government's response to coronavirus or COVID-19. It's a little bit of an in-joke, but I'll explain it. So I just want to start with something we have looked at before, and it's on screen here. It's the Bergamo. I suppose I will play this, and I hope the sound plays on this because I think I've figured it out. Most people have seen this because for one, I played it a different night, and it's been going around anyway. Bergamo newspaper in February, their obituary page was 1.25 pages, and then for March or like the next month, it was 10 pages. So it was a kind of really stark way to say the death rate has increased. Now, in this, what I'm talking about here is I'm not trying to debunk anyone and be super big brain and smart about it. I'm just making a case against that, even though I'm not committed to it. I'm just making the case. You know what I mean? It's steel sharpens steel, whatever. It's all good. The case that effectively give me a hello in the chat, lads. I want to see if you're all awake. But I am, and I have mods as well. Last True Gale, you're a mod. Yeah, so we're all good. But it's I'm going to use shorthand of conspiracy theorists, basically. Conspiracy theorists have a million different points of view on this. And then I suppose the official standard narrative is more or less a singular enough view, right? But while the conspiracy theorists have thanks for saying hi there. And while the conspiracy theorists, I'm using that shorthand. I know it's a derogatory phrase. I'm just I'm going to say the theorists, so nobody gets triggered. So the theorists have many different points of view on it, and they're all kind of different, but they do hone in. There's a common enough theme to these things, and it's that it's either like not happening, it's not real, or that it was some kind of man-made catastrophe, or that it's being used as an excuse to bring in some kind of totalitarian measures. Every crisis brings with it opportunity and all of that kind of stuff. And the thing I'm taking issue with, and it's not a personal thing, and I'm never fully convinced. I'm always Last True Gale says give it a like to get it up the rankings. Yeah, do give it a like, actually. Why not? It's easy. But the case I'm making, and I'm always open to learn more, and I'm skeptical either way, is that of all the theories on this thing, it is happening. It is a health emergency. It could have been shot in from aliens in space. It could have been a US military thing. It could be China, whatever, right? You can have your theory on that. You can have your theory on what the intentions of that are, let's say. Or you can just believe the standard narrative. But to me, it seems pretty solid that, at the very least, it's there is a health emergency of some description. Because the theory goes, or the arguments go on these things, and I'm not fully familiar with them. Again, the open mind remains. That effectively, the arguments are like it's testing bias. It's the people they're testing the wrong set of people, and actually, it's just if you really zoom out and you take an objective view of it, and don't kind of get myopic on what information you're looking at, it's actually rather just like the flu. Maybe a bit worse, a little bit, but like it is just like the flu ultimately. So there is not much to see here. That's the argument I'm focused on, and the people who say that, what they believe on the origins or the intentions of the virus, I don't know, but just the people who specifically say that, and there's a lot of people who say that. I was trying for last night. I was researching a lot about this kind of stuff, and it's really, really hard to get your hands around, because when you look at the flu, how many people get the flu or how many people die of the flu every year? Some will say 600,000, some will say 200,000, and both are kind of authoritative enough sources. So what are you meant to kind of believe on that? And it's so vast that it's just impossible. So I was trying to think of a way to maybe demonstrate that this is real, insofar as I thus far believe it is, a real health emergency, by finding a novel way to look at this numerically and just prove it, an elegant, efficient way of just demonstrating. And the Bergamo paper here you have in front of you is one way of doing that. You go from 1 month to the next, it was like whatever, 10 times more or 8 times more people just died. That way you don't have to worry about testing biases or any of that stuff. You just say, this is the raw amount of people that died. Now, if 10 times more people died, that skips over testing biases and stuff, because it's kind of like, well, you explain to me how 10 times people more died. If 10 times more people died and the official narrative is that there's this coronavirus going around, if you put both of those facts together, it shouldn't be too much of a jump further than that, just to say, well, I suppose that is, the virus is just somewhat deadlier than other things, quite a bit, and more virulent. And so basically the standard narrative on it is kind of true. But the counter argument to that could be something like, well, maybe there was a flu in March, like more deaths from some kind of flu, normal flu or something, or from any one of a million reasons, that made it like 8 times higher than February, which to me I think is a bit weak, because it's like, let's face it, that times many more deaths. I mean, who knows? But at the same time, really the most obvious thing to do there is just conclude that, well, yeah, that says it then. But again, that argument that there's a difference between measuring 1 month to another is not a good enough sample. And now I wish I had bigger samples and better samples. Deaths for every month and every day and every year for every reason and cause of death in Italy. I couldn't find it because of a language barrier, just imperfect data that is available anyway. There's only so much you can find. So I just found one other way to measure it, and it is the next one, which is from a Bergamo newspaper. And it just says that this is a really important thing to recognize. There was, I don't know which specific week it is, it doesn't particularly matter, a recent week during the height of this epidemic in Bergamo, which is in Lombardy, happening right now. A recent week, there were 330 deaths in this Bergamo province overall. Just that's as many people died, or the people that died from car crashes, heart attacks, coronavirus, flu, everything in, right? 330 people died in that week. And then they took the same week, just last year, 2019, and it was 23 deaths that same week last year. So that's 14 times more in the same week this year than last year. So, and then what you could say for that is, well, maybe there was a flu or tuberculosis, or people were smoking more, or pick your excuse you want, right? Maybe there was more people this year, this March, than the week they measured in this week or this year versus the one last year. Maybe that's the difference. There was some kind of different extenuating circumstances there that aren't coronavirus. But then you also have to, as we go back to the obituaries, you would also have to say the same for between this month currently and February, as the obituaries suggest. So it's not a total argument, or, well, to me it really is. Like you could be skeptical. You could say maybe the newspaper is fake, maybe the newspaper article here is fake, right? But it's like, well, this is published in a normal newspaper. In Bergamo, if this was published in the Irish Times, come on, it wouldn't be hard for people to be like, actually, like, if realistically only 30 people had died in the last in that particular week, surely there would be a undertaker, hundreds, thousands of people who would be related to this kind of number and say, that's not true. I would, so there'd be so many people being like, I think I'd know if 330 people died. This passes through my work, and I can tell you that I think I would know if there was a 14 times increase. There wasn't, but there was. That's what I'm saying, is that it would be impossible for this to be some kind of lie. And this too, this has got 10,000 retweets. It's in a newspaper, so it would again have to be either a fake newspaper that he printed, or the newspaper itself printed fake information, or whatever. Same story would apply to that. So you can't realistically, living in the real world, question these two sources are real. They have this fact, and they're two independent time frames. One is a week in one year compared to a week in a previous year, and a month this year compared to the previous month this year. So again, it's not complete. It's not taking the last 20 years and getting every average, so it's perfect data. But that's kind of hard to find. To me, I think if you don't take that information and just say, yeah, this coronavirus thing, no, on the other hand, it doesn't kill people in Germany so much. Various reasons, healthcare system, this, that, I don't know. It's weird. I admit that's weird. And I'm open-minded to be like, what's going on with that? But at least there is something about it in Italy. And then if you were to say, well, in Germany, it hasn't killed so many people yet. Well, it's killed a lot of people in China. It's currently killing a lot of people in Spain. And Kevin Murphy says something here. Sorry, I'm just distracted. The fact that they had scenario training 6 weeks before a coronavirus outbreak says it all. Again, I'm interested. We could go on and on with this stuff. Someone says, how many infected today? I can tell you now. I will get back to my point, but today, these numbers kind of chop and change as the day goes on, actually, but it is, as you will be able to see there, 334,000 diagnosed cases. These are all loose. Imagine how many people are not diagnosed, and you have US has a big spike now in cases. So of new cases, US is leading in new cases more than Italy. It's a bigger country, I suppose, but yeah, and deaths, etc. You can look that up yourself, Now, my point though, there are big numbers there. There are big numbers in China, death-wise. Spain too has a lot of deaths. So, like, you could say, well, what about Germany? But then I could go, well, what about Spain? What about many other countries where a lot of people are dying? You wouldn't expect the virus to be the uniform everywhere. You have different types of hospitals, different types of spread, different density of population, all sorts of things like that. It would be a bit different, and it would have kind of aberrations from each other. But what was the point Kevin Murphy made here? Oh yeah, that there was something before. Listen, I've seen some videos on the event 201, 207, whichever one it is, and just my case on that is, sorry, I'm going to get well distracted by the chat for this video, and I can't help it. Someone said a lot of false positives. Mac Tavish says a lot of false positives. The reason I go to the Italy death rate, overall death rate, is to avoid this stuff. And it's not to avoid the arguments or anything like that. It's just because we could have that argument probably for hours, and neither one of us would be right, because you can counter, well, it depends how you measure this and that and this and that. It is, and the nature of the beast is that it is incorrectly being tested. But just because it's, let's say, being, what was the point? Yeah, false positives doesn't mean it's not real. So I could just say, okay, grand, there are false positives, but then that doesn't mean it's not real. So it's kind of like, where can we get with that? We have to look at a more absolute thing, like I say, death rates in Italy overall, which are 14 times higher. You tell me why, right? And if you say, oh, well, it's because of, actually, there might have been a tuberculosis thing in Italy. I don't know whether there was or wasn't. But then you have to come back to me and give me the same for Spain. Give me the same for China. And you have to ascribe all of that to the flu. And again, I'm not dying on the hill of this. I'm just open about it. But it's worth, people don't seem to cross over. The theorists versus the official narrative people never really have this dialogue. I'm trying to just kind of fill the boots of a somewhat official narrative, at least specifically on the fact that it's a health emergency. I'm seeing all sorts of things like that. But so the event 201 that they planned, there was this summit, and there were names, big names, Bill Gates, and things like this involved all these elites meeting up and global institutions to kind of play out, and you can correct me if I'm getting this wrong, to kind of play out a pandemic scenario, or, prepare or play it out, drill it or whatever, which means, ergo, it's been done intentionally by them or whatever. And I don't mean to sound like Michael Shermer or some kind of skeptic person or whatever here, but you have to think about the logic of that. I mean, the ultimate point could be true. It could be a man-made thing or whatever. But just because Event 201 did that, it would be like with the recent wildfires in Australia. If you could find for me a meeting where a lot of kind of big wigs and big names, government officials, philanthropists, billionaires, all of these people all got together in Australia 2 years ago. And they had this conference where they talked about and kind of drilled for and did this scenario of a wildfire. And I was to tell you that, well, you can see here exactly what this guy said looks exactly how it played out. You can see this, and it would the answer to that is kind of like, well, you would expect that, wouldn't you? No, you would expect that if they were talking about a virus and a global pandemic, and kind of the conversation was centered around that. Well, yes, of course, then there would be all sorts of similarities, and the same goes with a lot of kind of confirmation biases that you can retrospectively look back on. But if you actually zoom out another bit, you kind of go, well, it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? I think it's the whole thing of looking back on a thing, to me. And like, again, if anybody comes up with a solid like link as to why it's man-made or this or that, in a way, I'd almost want it. It would be strangely reassuring, for one. And who doesn't like a good expose or whatever, right? There's no reason at all I have to not, happily choose to just believe that. If I get a case that makes it solid for me, someone says hit the like button, yeah, sure do, and share it as well. If you're on social media, on Twitter or whatever, if you're on your normie account on Facebook, whatever you want, share it around, because why not? But I kind of wish I had some of you almost in the video, here, because it's almost easier to talk about. I'm trying to read the chat. It's kind of hard because there's a million different points being made. But does anyone, at least, even if you don't quite agree with me on this, do you not think the death rate in Bergamo, 1 month to another and 1 year to another, is compelling? The fact that there's 14 times more, and you could run down a further rabbit hole to try and explain that away, but and I don't mean to sound like the kind of softening you up to just believe everything, but like, this sounds very lazy, but like, isn't it easier to believe, or isn't it more Occam's razory to say, well, yeah, it's 14 times more people died in this month. There's no particular obvious explanation, but there is this alleged, the mainstream media is telling me, coronavirus that they say would bear out kind of like that. Doesn't it just kind of make sense? I just want to make that point because there's so much on this. Like, I was talking to someone earlier about this. And Chopper here says things here will become compelling once the public sees how stretched the healthcare system is. Yeah, once you see it for yourself. And I have videos. I could find them here now. Here's the Spanish hospital again. The same people who are saying the 14 times death rate, this, that, the other, like basically saying, I have my theory. So basically the theorist will say, I have my theory and you have to debunk and put out every little fire and every little inference that I ever make. But for some reason, the person who, in this particular instance, basically believes the standard narrative, it's a virus, that is actually a health emergency. When I put the things to them, the really big things, all these videos, all of the people who would need to be in on it, as someone said recently, someone who's in the chat actually, if this was some kind of global conspiracy, it would have to involve Iran and Russia and North Korea, all these kind of international community pariahs we all usually accept. So they're in on it too. Not to mind all the other countries having to agree with each other. You could argue that they're Western liberal or something like that. But Iran is outside the international community, sworn enemies, as is Russia, as is North Korea. So you either have to explain that away. Maybe it was released and they were tricked by it as well. But you have to go pretty far, and my point is the theorists have to answer these questions just as much as I have to answer, why did they do a pandemic exercise and then a pandemic happened and the pandemic kind of resembles the exercise there? I mean, to me, that's an easy one to answer because you would expect that to happen. But why doesn't the theorist have to answer me? Why are all these people on the floor in a hospital? Are they saying that, and I don't mean to caricature anyone here, but are they saying the newspaper clippings here, right, about deaths are fake, or the numbers are fake, or they can be explained away by some other circumstance, which maybe the theorist wouldn't go on to explain to me how, because that's what I'm saying. There seems to be less of a burden there. Explain to me this video in Spain of the hospital. How many people would have to be in on this to what, be on the floor crisis acting? I mean, I know, and I'm the first person to say crisis actors happen. Look at Syria and the white helmets, right, and all that. But you would have to have crisis actors in Spain and Italy, plus the numbers, plus the deaths, the entire thing put together, one thing after another. There's so much, right? People I know in Italy, who've told me themselves, and people I know who know people in Italy who've heard it straight from the horse's mouth, medical people, all of that. And I'm going to get on to, you might kind of say, why are you harping on this? Like, why would you waste your breath on this? Whatever. There's a reason. It's important to shelve this and not shelve it. The question will remain open. Of course, I want skepticism. I like that. I like to see that. But to see people going around kind of sticking to it and being a little bit dogmatic, to be honest, like the theorist will call the ordinary person who believes the standard narrative sheeple. But it's like, well, who is the one who's more kind of stuck to a doctrinal set of beliefs where, like, it's always the government initiating a crisis to take advantage of it in this way, and it's always the government kind of poisoning and trying to dull down and what's the word, sedate the people. Why is it that it has to follow that? Like, isn't it a bit weird? And why don't you answer questions about it? Like, why are you always the one who, I'm just asking questions, but then you're a sheeple. But then if you press the person on specifics, they'll go, well, I'm just asking some questions. I'm just being so. So it's like, you have to say which one it is. And again, there's a reason. There's a cost to just being, what's the word, obtuse with these things. It's not without cost. I mean, in the bigger picture, politically and all of these things. Anyway, I'm rambling. Yeah, so this video, I'll just give you some audio on this. Tell me if you can hear the audio on this video I'm playing for you. Right, that's kind of that. I don't know. Yeah, if you're getting audio on that, just give me a 5x5, because then I know when I play videos from here on in, you're getting some of that. Cool, thanks. So. And it's not, again, I'm not attacking people who have these theories at all. It's just like, it's not so much that people have the theories. It's just the way the debate has gone about. It's like, for example, you're not being a good skeptic, in my opinion, to find tiny little holes in, let's say, the official story. Like, oh, there's not so many deaths in Germany, and the testing is a little bit biased, or the sampling is a bit weird, or whatever, to say, boom, that means it's fake, or I can attach my theory to it. This kind of grander theory about it's all a plot or whatever, when it's like, you have to, if I'm presenting an argument that I feel like people won't quite believe me on, and I truly believe it, my first thing is to not just say, I found these little interesting things. I try to address the counter skepticism and try to preempt it beforehand and say, so let's say I'm arguing that the deaths in Germany are low and event 201. Instead of just arguing those, I would say, well, I know you're probably wondering about the deaths in Italy, and here's my thing on that. As in, I, as the theorist, have to defend some of those points as well. What about this? What about that? What about how many countries would need to be kind of in on it? What about, and when I see the people making these theories and claims, they don't seem to be conscious of those doubts that people would naturally have. And to me, that's strange. I think when you're really quite strong on something, a hard to believe claim, but you're like, I know it's hard to believe, but I'm telling you, I can really make a convincing case on this. So here's your concerns, and here's me addressing them before you even make them, because that's how strong it is. I am on this. Adrian Walsh says, I shared Polly earlier. She's brilliant. I really like her videos. I have to say, I disagree with the 201, her video on that. That's fine. We're adults, right? It's not that I disagree so much. It's just I'm left thoroughly unconvinced. I'm entitled to be, right. I feel like maybe the inferences she's making or the tone she's giving off on that is far more confident than the kind of evidence she's presenting is. I think there's a big gap there, personally. And that doesn't mean that her overall thesis isn't true. I mean, who knows, it could be true. I'm just saying, like, it's definitely not going to be true based on the evidence she put forth, making just inferences based on, like, the pandemic procedures beforehand resembling the pandemic. That's effectively it. I'm not convinced by that. Like, I'm sorry. And the reason I say there's a cost to this is, for one, let's say for the theorists, right? This, say it's true. It's as deadly and virulent as people say. Well, then you would need to be kind of upfront about that, because it's a big risk. You should be balancing as well. Like, well, if I'm wrong about this, it kind of matters. I seem to have some massive truck driving. Do you know what it feels like? It's sorry. Yeah, it's a bus, I think. I was like, is there a noise-making vehicle outside my house? One that just makes noise. But anyway, yeah. There's a risk. It's not like we're talking about some innocuous thing where true or false, it's not a big deal. Well, if you choose to ignore this because whatever, based on kind of weak evidence that it's fake or whatever. Someone says bus of asylum seekers. They're coming to get me. But it matters, because it's like, okay, so let's say if we all said, okay, based on this kind of really loose speculation, if we just say, okay, cool, it's a thing, it's whatever, then many people could die, right? And I know you say, oh, you're being scared by the theory, by the government or whatever, but it's like, well, no, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that at least it's highly likely or possible that this is what it is. I mean, you can tell me if I'm wasting my breath here with this stuff, like, or stating the obvious, but the other thing is political capital. So, the people who theorize on this might say, oh, well, I don't care about political capital. I just want to be, skeptical and, question the elite or the globalists or the whatever. But it's like, well, no, like, I mean, if you go around saying everything is fake and everything is a crisis in order to bring in more state control and totalitarianism, and everything is to kind of dull people down, so or fry people's brain, 5G, blah blah blah, everything, right? The whole list of them. It seems like it's that same theory, and when you bring it to a big mass spectacle like this, and it is a little bit of a spectacle, a bit of hype, by media and all of that, all eyes are fixed on it, right? How well are you going to be believed on everything else if you're wrong, for example? And that's the other thing. The first thing you should have really is to come out. It's just like I mentioned, Morgot said in his video. If you come out and you have a little bit of a theory on it, you go, I think it's the testing is wrong, whatever. I think it's not a big deal. I think it's just like the flu. I think it was started, whatever, by the globalists, whatever. If you're not coming out and going, no, I really don't know. It's a lot to take in. There's a lot of stuff here. I really don't know. And, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that it is real. I mean, there's a good chance that it is precisely real, but let's just ask questions around the edges. That's fine. But also, when you're trying to ask those questions, do it with some evidence. You know what I mean? Just this kind of picking apart little tidbits and isolating those without addressing the rest is just, to me, it's, sorry. Someone says stop showing the video. I will. I'm reading the chat. I'm trying to look at the camera and talk. I forget. But okay, so it's just me now. What even is my point? And I'm going to get onto some skepticism. There's a Zero Hedge article here that says, kind of claims that it's maybe not so big a deal and all of this stuff. I haven't read it yet, but I want to read through it with you. I mean, what else is a cost of this? I mean, here's a big factor as well for me, is that I really value skepticism going forward with this issue, because we are going to have, I mean, we're entering a police state, a totalitarian, basically police state on this. Whether it's justified or not, that's what we're getting, right? And because I'm pretty convinced there is a health emergency here, I feel like I don't want to have reckless skepticism. I know that sounds like a weird Orwellian phrase or whatever, but this kind of willy-nilly, like half-cocked kind of skepticism, right? Where you're presenting arguments and big, bold claims that like are hard to believe with kind of no evidence, just denying things. They're not going to clean off. But when you're doing that, what about when and people lose faith in that because you're drawing inferences where there don't need to be, and so people see that, and the dichotomy becomes you either believe the whole thing is fake and it's just like the flu or whatever, so we shouldn't really respond to it in any way, or or it's the official narrative, and we go full Varadkar totalitarian state, unquestioned. Everybody stay inside. Don't ever do anything wrong. You really don't want that to be your dialectic. I don't anyway. And that's why I'm kind of doing this, is to be a bit more. I feel like sometimes the theorists live in their own world a little bit. And what they do is they can find 3 or 4 things, little weaknesses, which I admit in this. Germany's death rate is low. Why is that? Why did videos or seemingly organic content from China that was coming out regularly for a few weeks just suddenly disappear when they had a firewall before and after that few weeks where that content was? There's all sorts of little things. But it would be weird if there were a situation where you couldn't kind of pick over something and find that. It's easy to find little chinks in the armor there a little bit, but you're ignoring all the armor, right? You have to address that as well. And my point is, anyway, that when it comes to argue, I really am worried about I support a bit of the self-isolation and all that stuff, those measures, at least in the short term, till we can figure out what's going on, right? But if it gets to the point where you can't leave the house at all, even by yourself, and it just goes on, and there's also the question, of course, of is it worth it? Now, I value the life of the elderly and the sick, and even people who aren't sick can die from this. But there is to give you a kind of a exaggerated analogy, if they said we have to stay in for the next 20 years, or else X amount of people could die from this, well, you would obviously go, well, that's ridiculous. That's a non-starter. We can't do that. That's just a thought experiment, because obviously you reduce that time down. You reduce it to 2 weeks, a month, 2 months. Maybe you can say, yeah, fine. But then you go over that and you start to bleed in between the 20 years and the 1 month or 2 months. And there is a kind of a spectrum there where you start to go, you have to have a legit discussion about what this is. And you don't just want to leave it up to the government and journalists and NGOs or whoever, economists. You want to, Walshy says an 18-year-old died today. Yeah, but I'm see what I'm trying to do is address a little bit of skepticism as well. So, I'm trying to give other, because I don't know, should I be addressing people who say everything is fake? Oh, well, that's fake. That's fake. That person died of the flu, but it was just measured as coronavirus or whatever, But I mean, I want the argument, especially from nationalists, to be clear. And I'm not trying to dictate. It's just my point of view. Take it or leave it. I want it to be clear, like the delineation of skepticism against, for example, you can't go within 2 meters of somebody on the street, but you can fly from one country to the other. Because open borders cannot be sacrificed. That's not doable. But what can be sacrificed is your ability to leave the house. That's a weird thing. I want to be able to argue against that. I want to be able to argue against the fact that in spite of it being a bad virus, yes, we can try to find some treatments and all of that for it. Or at a certain point, it just isn't worth it anymore. The 100% lockdown, that can't go on forever. Everybody has to admit that much. People will also be soon, mark my words, in a couple of weeks, everybody in Ireland, light switch, went on to accept this lockdown and stuff. I myself did, right? In a way that could potentially be called kind of a little bit disconcerting. But at the same time, everybody's into it now. Do not, people will almost self-enforce it among each other, right? I did down at the pub and Temple Bar, if you saw that video. Guilty as charged, right? But that can only last for so long. After a couple of weeks, people will go stir crazy and get cabin fever, and people will just start saying, you know what, I have a life to live. I'm going insane. I need to earn money. I need to whatever. And they will just go, you know what, fuck it. I'm leaving the house, whatever. And when that starts happening en masse, and if the state want to stop it and all of that, there has to be a conversation had on that topic. And I want nationalists, I certainly do myself, and I want nationalists and people, like-minded people, to be able to partake in that conversation. But if you're sitting on the sidelines of that, and I'm not just doing this politically, I believe what I believe to be true as well, but I'm just talking about the more, call it cynical, kind of, strategic aspect of it too, but based on the fact that I do believe it's true. I don't want, while that conversation is being had, and while we have a very big role to play in that, to be, even if we are just online trolls or whatever, trust me, we're relevant, right? There's a reason there's so much attention given in all of this. The big scary, Russian trolls or scary bots or what far right they say, which we're not, of course. We're all centrists, obviously. But you know, my point being, we have a role to play in that, and I don't want when that time comes around. And it's not that it's going to come around; it's coming around right this minute. It's coming around tomorrow. It's coming around the day after. It's coming around in 2 weeks. This is very quickly moving, and I want us to be able to partake in that. These really important questions of where we are at with this whole thing, and what is worth what, and what our rights are, and why we should have those rights or not have those rights, or all of these things, right? I think we have a lot to say on it, and I don't want in a month's time, when it's starting to come to the fore even more, us to be like, basically it's just the flu, bro. It's not real. It's this or that. It's this or that or whatever. And I'd be willing to take that unpopular position if there was a legitimate case that it's true. But in my opinion, it's both bad, like looks bad, is bad, puts you in a really bad place. People lose faith in you. And also it happens to, as far as I can see it, not be true. By which I mean it's true that this virus is basically a health emergency that could overwhelm healthcare systems. So it's not just the old people and the sick people and all of that. It's also just you go in after a car crash and you might not be able to get life support, you know, so it could affect everybody. And that's bad. Yeah, I hope you kind of get my point on that. You know, you need to move forward with a little bit of clarity, and you can't just say everything is fake, because you basically marginalize yourself from social discourse and actually having an impact on things. So I just want to check the chat and see what people think. I mean, am I making sense? Am I off the fucking wall? But then, you know, I know there are questions about this. The main point I'm making in this video, and I will repeat it, is just, we need to be in the game here. And again, if it were true that it were fake or something, and just the flu, and it were an unpopular position, I would take the unpopular position. I'm just saying, why would you take an unpopular position that probably is untrue as well? Or constantly, even if you do believe that, it's because I've seen some of the theorists say to me, because they've kind of moved to know a little bit, it's kind of a health emergency. I can see that much, but then again, I think it was man-made, and I also think it was this, and I think it's for this and for this. There's like 10 different theories going, none of which are actually, they might actually end up being true, that's fine, but none of them have any evidence of any description on them. Some of them are a little bit hard to believe. And just so, even though you might be moving more towards what you could say is a standard position on this, you're always trying to move towards the more fringe, the more formulaic kind of conspiratorial arguments. It's just, to me, that's not the way to go. And now that's not to say don't be skeptical. Always keep an open mind. That's fine, keep an open mind and ask these questions. But this kind of thing of not so much having the open mind, but really wanting to move way off out to the conspiratorial for no reason, basically. Computing forever is in the chat. We have ourselves a celebrity. When it reaches the level of needing to show a piece of paper to the police in order to leave your house, you know the government has overreached. I absolutely agree, right? If I go to the beach, if I drive in my own car by myself to the beach, and there's maybe some people on the beach, but I'm like, I mean, at any given time, I can keep like 50 meters between me and somebody else, and there's a big wind blowing. At that point, it's like, look, bud, I'll take my chances. Yeah, just get out of my face. Like, there's a point where it goes beyond, well, the government has legislated for this, and it's allowed this, and you weigh it against the health emergency and all that. There is a point where you go, it's that's stupid. It's beyond almost even discourse at that point. It's just like, this is stupid. There's nothing worse than this. And it comes back to all these interesting arguments of give me freedom or give me death, you know, that kind of stuff, which sounds like a cheesy American thing to say, but there's something to it. There's a point comes where it's like freedom versus security. And I don't mean freedom like freedom to profit, or, you know, freedom to take heroin, or this kind of like far out libertarian freedom. I just mean the basic freedom. I drive to the beach in my car. I walk around by myself, right? Sorry, guard. I think I'll manage my own risks here just fine, you know, but it's on the legislation. Leo said so. There is a point where you have to fight back on these things, but I just think you need to be fighting back against it while saying this is a health emergency, or if the facts prove that it isn't or something, then fine. But as it goes now, it's leaning towards, when you take in, not just taking in 201 and Germany's low death rate, take the totality of information of everything. And you have to at least at least lean towards the fact that this probably is what it is, what it seems to be. And it's just that what's the word? It is kind of obtuseness, and then going from like heavily propounding the theory that it's only sheep will believe it, and the sheep will believe it, and a strong theory, and then when it comes to the point of, okay, how about we debate this, both sides of this, you know what I mean? Let's not just address your questions, but let's address my questions to you as well. It kind of goes, well, I'm just asking questions, you know what I mean? It's good to just ask some questions. It's like, well, you're not really asking questions now to start with, were you? You were being pretty sure about it to start with. That's kind of maybe my thing on that. But again, if I had made this video a couple of days ago, I would have been more, what's the word? I would have been more stuck in my ways that this is real or whatever. And I do think the Italian death thing has me pretty strongly convinced, and just the overall totality. I'm more towards, it's strange because it's not so much that I'm closer to the theorists, right, on this kind of stuff, because I'm not. I'm closer to skepticism, good quality skepticism that doesn't just want to infer the formulaic idea of crisis and solution and trying to dull down the population, just trying to run over those tracks again, but just genuine, like really thinking hard about it and trying to crunch facts and numbers and all that. And but being kind of responsible and being sensitive to a mass audience, being like, how would I make this argument to a mass audience so that they actually can kind of, if you really have a good argument to make, in 5 minutes you can have them coming away going, I thought that guy might have been a bit of a conspiracy theorist to start with, but he made a pretty bulletproof argument. Jesus, yeah. And if you're not able to make that argument, you just have to be like, I genuinely don't know, but I just think we should be careful of government overreach. I also think that if you're worried about overreaction by the state, which I definitely am, you shouldn't have to lean on the argument of simply it's not real, or it's just like the flu. I get the sense that maybe some people who are correctly skeptical of governmental and reaction overreach, correctly, I agree with them to some extent, instead of making that argument, which is hard and complicated and it's philosophical, there's a lot to it, and you actually have to put your kind of, you have to take a stance philosophically. You have to say, this is just what I believe fundamentally about the world and human nature and what kind of trade-offs should be made. And I feel like maybe it's easier to just say it's fake for this reason, and if it's not fake for that reason, it's fake for this reason, and it's fake for this reason, and I'm not going to address any problems with my theory there. I'll just kind of say it's probably, I'm really sure, even though the information I have is just kind of an inference. Don't do that. Make the hard argument. Make the point you want to make, which is, and again, I stress, be skeptical of the facts, look at it, but until you find something good, kind of go, I don't know, right? But I feel like the point people want to make is that overreach. This is they say this is a totalitarian move by the government to force people into their homes and all that kind of stuff, which kind of distracts people, because let's say you're wrong. Just entertain me for a second, right? Let's say you're wrong and it actually is just a virus. It's just a virus that happened or whatever. Say you're wrong, but you make the argument that it is governmental plot to do all this kind of stuff, right? You have turned off the person who is listening to you, because 99 out of 100 people will go, yeah, I mean, unless you can prove it to me, then you're full of shit and I'm just not listening to you anymore. When what you could have said is, maybe the virus is completely natural. It probably is, or at least it's real and it's a health emergency. But the government can use this in a way that we don't want. Here's why we don't want that. Here's why it's not worth that trade-off, or is only worth that trade-off only so far. And here's what is actually at stake. Think about it. I know right now you're just going for toilet roll in Tesco's and you're worried and you're in your first week of a little bit of isolation, so you can handle it and stuff. But let's just think about this a few months forward. Let's just think about what's at stake in this indefinite sense. We need to have these arguments. But if my only way to say that to you is, yeah, it's all fake. The things I'm worried about are not just things I'm worried about. They were all schemed on long in advance. You don't necessarily, no, if that's the case, add that bit on. But if you don't really know that that's the case, don't add that bit on. That wrecks it, right? That's my point. That kind of, in a way, ruins your argument, because it's like, we could have had a perfectly sound, like, reasonable argument to make your point. but don't add on things you don't know. Harry Mary is saying, I waffle on. Look, you don't have to watch, okay? And I do waffle, Grant. I take your point. I want to see on on 4 there says there was a mass vaccination program in northern Italy in December, followed up by a second shot in January. It particularly targeted older people. Vaccines temporarily weaken the immune system. I mean, see, here's the thing about that, is that I take that on board, and you can come back to me on that. And I know you can't know for sure right now. It's early days and stuff. Maybe with time you'll be vindicated. But let's say between the 1 week in March this year versus the similar week in March last year, the same week, there's a 14 times death increase this year. Now, I know there could have been a vaccine thing which kind of has an effect, but could it have 14 times effect? Again, my instinct, right? Call me ignorant, is just to say, I don't know if it would kind of have that impact, right? And, you know, there's a good proportion, I don't know what it is exactly, but there's a surprisingly higher than expected proportion of younger people actually die from this too, who maybe wouldn't have gotten that vaccine. What did Forrest say exactly again? Sorry, I'm trying to find it. Okay, particularly targeted older people. Again, it's interesting, but does it cover the 14 times thing? To me, it's kind of unlikely, right? And then you could say, well, okay, it covered a doubling of death. And then extra smoking caused another doubling of death, the tripling. And the age profile makes it 4 times more deaths. And something about their healthcare service makes it 5 times more, let's say. And something else makes it 6 times more. Well, this is 14 times higher. So it's kind of like, you know, isn't the more kind of, let's say, obvious thing, for one to sound, not to sound ignorant, to say kind of like, well, yeah, there's allegedly this coronavirus going around, which apparently can cause a lot of deaths. We're unclear exactly on how many and whatever, but it seems to be the case. And we have the 14 times, so probably it could have a lot to do with that, right? Now, I know Fora could say, well, then I have to explain Germany. I don't know how to. But then, on the other hand, the vaccination program in Italy, right, caused a lot of deaths. What about Spain? Spain is having like similar levels of death, right? You would have to go away to Spain and find another vaccination program. And if you didn't find a vaccination program in Spain, you could say, well, there was this thing, actually, something that could be a legitimate thing, right? But again, you look around, I suppose you could find that thing in Spain. I'm sure there is something you could plug in and say that kind of works for that. You know, do you get what I mean? Now, I take the point on board. On 4 there is making good points, though, and I want to stick. A month or 2 later along comes a novel coronavirus, would significantly explain what's happening in Lombardy. I mean, is the point that coronavirus was caused by the vaccine, or just and then there's just the standard questions that people, I'm going with like death rates and all that, but then there's just the standard thing of how many people would need to be in on it, how many different regimes around the world would need to kind of be in on it, how many healthcare workers, lab technicians, all of this stuff. That's kind of the most obvious one, really. Like, it's like, you know, and I want to address another point as well, actually, that I've seen on Twitter. So there's so much going on in the chat here. The government playing a blinder, last through Gale. I will get to it. I'll actually just move on to it because, look, I've made my point. But there's just one more. Extremely dry hands, Dave Cullen says. Dave Dry Hands Cullen. I have my stuff here as well. I know it does kind of wreck you a little bit. And Forrest says he'll find links and send them to me. Again, I'm open. I want to read these things. I mean, if I got something and I was like, holy shit, I mean, come on, I would have a great video out of that. I would love to make my video. I love making a case, right? And just if I felt like it was kind of over that mark of, you know, the smell test, where it's like, oh, it's interesting that, in fact, actually, yeah, but it has to like overwhelm everything else that kind of points to Corona being a thing, you know, a real, what it says on the tin. And it would have to overwhelm that, not just be an interesting little sub point. It would have to overwhelm those things. I'll just make one last point on that, and then we'll get on to it's kind of more fun, to be honest. The blinder, the playing a blinder thing. So it's that there are people, I've noticed some people on Twitter, right, and they're fine, they're like good accounts I like and I follow and all that and agree with on loads, but it's kind of this whole idea that like, oh well, you had these nationalists on the right who believe with something like immigration, there, which I do believe these things. This is a correct summation of my view on this. They will say these nationalists will say the government and the kind of global elite and these multinational institutions and NGOs and all of this conspire to kind of replace populations in the West, demographic replacement, and immigration, and this kind of like weird anti-racism thing that's way overboard and all this kind of stuff, right? They're all conspiring against that and to shut down dissidents. So I might say, oh, they're trying to shut me down. They don't like what I have to say. Garrod, you sound like quite the conspiracy theorist there, right? On one end, and that's fine. But then suddenly the government come out and tell you something about a virus, and you just go along with it, and you're saying, please crack down on me, please lock me in my home, please whatever, right? That's basically how the argument goes. It's like 1 minute you're all talk about how corrupt and untrustworthy the global elite are and the government and all this. Next minute you're locking yourself inside because they told you to, right? I think I'm fairly putting the argument forth. Isn't that funny? The people who say that, they're going to go, isn't that funny? You know, they suddenly become sheep. And I'm like, I'm kind of looking at that going and saying like, well, so I'm just going to have a drink, actually. I deserve it. But it's like, well, yes, you're correct in saying in one instance, I have this point of view. And in another instance, I take a different point of view to it. I admit to that, right? I do. Because the immigration thing, there's no point going on about it at length. The immigration thing, I've talked about that loads of times. But like just briefly, that's a kind of no wine tonight. No, I'm on the cider. But so with the immigration thing, it's like it's decades long, started since like post-war, the 60s. It's a kind of form of blasphemy that's kind of slowly rolled over society, which is kind of in a sense normal. It's become a taboo. You can't talk about it, and there are kind of financial interests into it. But you can really draw on the dots of that and make a case. Solidly on that. And I feel like when I make the arguments on that, I'm making a case solidly, which is well backed up, and like I am joining dots like the crazy guy on the board, but they're being joined pretty solidly, where I think it's objectively undeniable for most people who would look at it, right? And also, the claims I'm making are reasonable too. You know, you're saying, yes, this does serve businesses, the free flow of labor, and this, that, and the other, and you can just see where they say it openly themselves. They actually, in a way, sometimes when you're saying let's say there's this replacement migration happening, right? You say that, but it's like you can go to any NGO, European Council members, and all sorts of people who say precisely the same thing. It's a shocking fact of its own that it's like 1 minute you're being castigated for saying it by the regime, we'll say, but the next minute they're saying it themselves. And I mentioned that only to point out that our claims are not wild, because it's like, no, they say it themselves. It's just there's a little bit of you're not allowed to say it from a critical point of view. Whatever, right? That's my point. There is like that the immigration thing is making one claim or a set of claims under certain circumstances, and then to have whatever point of view you have about this coronavirus, or you could call it alleged coronavirus, whatever, right? Is another different thing. So who is being the formulaic kind of person there, or the one who's kind of maybe potentially more flawed in their thinking? The person who needs to ascribe the very same level of beliefs to one thing to another thing, or the person who has a differing set of beliefs on those two things? Now, that doesn't mean I'm right or the people who make that point are wrong. I'm just saying the premise criticizing nationalists that 1 minute they believe this and that is on its face silly, right? You could argue that nationalists are wrong, fine, or something like that. But the idea that nationalists are flawed because they take a different approach to a different thing is just specifically that kind of argument or that kind of joke or that kind of criticism doesn't make any sense, right? Even if you're right, let's say the person who would have this point of view, and I'm wrong, going about it that way doesn't make sense, because that doesn't kind of logically follow at all, right? Necessarily. So anyway, I'm going to have another couple of sips, and then I'm going to go through the streamer, or what's it called? The streamer, Jesus, the blinder pill. So let's bring the screen back up again, and let's see what I can find. I was going to go through these 2 Zero Hedge articles. What I'll do is at the end, if anyone still cares, I'll go through these. But for now, so I found his account is The Patriot, a very funny account I've discovered there. It's pretty funny and a very interesting account. A lot of good content there. But so what happened is Leo Varadkar did a speech like last week. I don't mark the days when he gives speeches, right? It was sometime like last week, whatever. Anyway, it was one of those days. Varadkar gave his speech, address to the nation or whatever, right? And I'll be honest with you, I haven't watched it, so you can call me ignorant here. I haven't watched it. I don't really care to. I'm sure it was a fine speech or whatever, right? From what I hear people say, it was just kind of stating what everybody kind of knows. Maybe he delivered it well. I don't know. But you had all these regime enforcers, not regime enforcers, but regime arse slickers, I suppose, were being like, you can see here, Blue Hugh O'Connell was as they call him. So there's this article in the Independent. I forgot to take my drinks. Yeah, they're writing this article like 2 days or a day or two after he gave this speech, saying, behind the lines, the WHO. I don't know. Can you see my screen there decently enough? Let me just check. So yeah, you can. I think behind the lines, the who, how, and why that created Leo Varadkar's historic speech with this picture from behind, like almost of this kind of like Frost Nixon, this kind of political seminal moment, fight them on the beaches. They're trying to mythologize this event 2 days after it's happened, and it was probably, from what I hear, a pretty innocuous kind of speech, right? And they're mythologizing it 2 days later with the Sean, whatever. I'm not going to read this article. And then Hugh O'Connell is saying the inside story of that speech by Varadkar, like complete kiss in the hole, regime hole kissing going on there. And the very interesting feature of what happened is that on Twitter, I imagine a lot of you know this, but it still surprises me. The extent, you have to go through it with me. The extent of this is what's interesting. So all of these blue checks and kind of like bougie kind of people started saying that Leo Varadkar played a blinder, and they were all using this phrase to the point where me and a few other guys were looking at that being like, what is this? Is this, we're almost starting to sound like the kind of Democrats in America of like, this must be a conspiracy of bots and agents and stuff. It must be fake. Now, excuse me, burped into the mic there, but it's not like I'm saying it's bots or anything. Maybe it is, I don't know, somehow. But no, I think like it's just the strange thing about it is that it doesn't really need to be bots, because it's almost like the human beings who did write these tweets behave like robots, which is kind of more disturbing, I think, to be honest. They all said the very same phrase, kiss and hole, but the main thing is that they said the very same phrase. And I just have to show you this. He played a blinder. So proud. What's her name? I'm on the Patriots Twitter here, but there was this what's her name? Doireann Garrahy, this kind of like Irish celebrity, was like, oh my God, I'm crying my eyes out, because of Varadkar's speech, so amazing or something like that. Very like weird, very kind of like Mao's kind of Red Guard, fanatical. It's like the guy gave a speech. They haven't really done anything that effective with this virus. It hasn't even played out yet. They could have addressed this ages ago. They're telling us the cases are in the east of the country. There's so many flaws to this. It's unreal. And he just gave a speech and you're crying your eyes out. As Dave says here, Dave Cullen, computing forever in the chat, literally shaking. But, so that started, not that started it off, but that was just the kind of tip of the spear of this kind of reaction by these certain types of people who all were using the same phrase. And again, I'm not saying it's bots, but it just may as well be very weird psychological phenomenon. And if you think I'm off the wall on this, okay, I just want the stream to catch up with me. I'm just going to look at a different screen. So We have the funny meme here by Close the Border, another great Twitter account. Yeah, Leo playing a blinder. So let's just go through it, right? So you're playing a blinder. I was unsure of my vote. I wish I had voted you first. Organized, straightforward, and pragmatic. Again, it sounds like African level newspaper propaganda, or this kind of like, so effective and diligent in time of crisis. Unshakable leader. It's this kind of weird kind of thing. It's like, I thought we were in the liberal West where you're meant to be kind of generally kind of question power and hold it to task and all of that, and we're really liberal and right on and stuff. What happened to that? Suddenly it's like kind of weird, trendy D4 mimosa style North Koreanisms. So I think we're lucky to have what we have right now, and they're playing a blinder. And again, you see my point here. This is all just playing a blinder. And I'll just stop on maybe the interesting ones. He said, not all heroes wear capes, some wear scrubs and gowns. These kind of throwaway like little lines or whatever. Playing a blinder. Now, the main thing here is I can't say too much because I can just repeat playing a blinder. If you're listening to this and not watching, I'd recommend just for a sec, just to watch, just to kind of focus on how long I'm scrolling down here for. Eric Laller says playing a blinder. Pippa O'Connor Ormond says playing a blinder. These are all saying playing a blinder. Spot it yourself as you read. Pick out the playing a blinder bit. Will Leahy, this one is particularly interesting. I'll stop for this. So he is RTE presenter. He's even self-aware about this. I'm not sure if my position with the national broadcaster prohibits me from making this comment, but I will. For a man who was voted out of office 5 weeks ago and is merely a caretaker, this guy is playing a blinder. It goes on and it goes on and it goes on. I kind of almost don't know what to say because it's just the same thing. He's playing a blinder. It's Leo and Simon playing a blinder. I think I like Leo playing a blinder. Well done, Leo. Your government are playing a blinder. How are they playing a blinder? What is blinder-y about it? Nothing in particular, right? They let people from Bergamo Airport fly into Dublin pretty handily for like the rugby weekend. I think that I wouldn't quite call that funny comment from Celtic Crusader there. That's all I'll say. I can't. But yeah, there's no blinder being played. No blinder, right? Not happening. Playing a blinder. Just the extent of this, right? Very impressive, compassionate speech. Like, if there's a little tone of compassion to the speech, well, what is it going to have? Like, it was a speech of ruthless heartlessness. It was a speech of a reckless abandon and disregard for life. It was meant to be compassionate, I suppose, speech that someone wrote for him and he got up and read, and it's compassionate. This kind of surface level stuff is just, it's just not cool. More of it. He's playing a blinder. I'm determined to get to the end here. Leo playing a blinder. You're playing a blinder, Leo. Playing a blinder, Simon. Yeah, playing a blinder. Jesus Christ. Playing a blinder so far. Good stuff. Have to say you're playing a blinder. Playing a blinder. It's starting to sound like it doesn't make sense to me anymore. To be fair, he's playing a blinder, unlike Boris, which is a classic thing in the Irish media. I'm no Anglophile, but this kind of like D4-y kind of thing, which is funnily enough because they're kind of Anglos in their own way. But there is this kind of thing of like, Scotland has it too and stuff. And it's like, whatever, be anti-British, but it's like just that kind of weird, like inferiority complex, kind of doing this kind of thing is just so stupid. Like, and it's a tell of a regime. Again, I'm not an Anglophile Irish West Brit of any description, right? I don't like that. But there's this kind of strangely other thing where there's this kind of 10-year-old nationalism kind of thing of like, oh, they're so disorganized and our government are so on top of things. So it's still kissing the regime hoop in its own way. Playing a blinder. So we're still going. This has to end, lads. This has to end. The blinder. He's playing a blinder. It's still going. This is just all the tweets in kind of like one couple of hours or one day maybe. I think that is it. So I don't know. I couldn't count how many, but it's like so many, maybe hundreds. I don't know. Unbelievable. So that's your blinder, people. It's just, I don't know what even is the point? What can I say about that? There is just this kind of like fawning set of people. Like the moment a crisis sets in, they don't know what to do. They don't know what to make of it, and the government throws them any scrap of anything, and they're like playing a blinder. Whereas if you had asked them a week previously, are you worried about coronavirus? They'd either say, I don't know what you're talking about, or it's a conspiracy theory. You know what I mean? So myself and a few other kind of like-minded people about 6 weeks ago or more were kind of looking at the trends in China, the numbers, the what is it called, the RNO, and all this kind of stuff, being like, oh, it could do this and that and this and that, and like, kind of we should take these measures, and yeah, it's just a few guys kind of in a like talking to each other, but we'd have been making these points publicly as well, like on just online and stuff, throwing it out there. And the general consensus among the same people, the playing a blinder people, would have been like, basically, that's just this kind of fake news or conspiracy theory or it's whatever. It's 8 weeks ago. It's like those same people would have been saying that when people would have been talking about preparing a long while ago. You had this doctor, the one who was on primetime, who criticized Simon Harris for keeping the free travel open and Schengen, or we're not in Schengen, I think, but basically this kind of open border. Criticized and all of this stuff, and people were kind of like, yeah, fair play to her. But then Varadkar gets up like a couple of days later, gives a speech that's compassionate. It's like playing a blinder. They have it in hand. We're in good hands. We're this, we're that, we're whatever. And I actually might have him here, Paddy Cosgrave. Dave Cullen, Computing Forever, says, why don't the media focus more on the 97,000 who've recovered? Let's see. It's not that I don't believe that or whatever. Recovered, yeah, 97,574 recovered, and deaths 14,000. To be fair, what I would say to that is for one, the deaths are more sensational. Easy answer. And also, I suppose 14,600 deaths is quite a bit out of whether you're looking at, well, how much is that overall as per the cases? And then you could say, well, that's probably not all the cases. There's probably twice or three times as many. Again, I'm open to these arguments, and I do kind of go, this some of this doesn't make sense. I made my point earlier, if anything, to strengthen the skeptical argument and not have it just conflate itself with kind of silly things, and just kind of keep it solid, keep it cerebral, keep it good. And that's all I'm saying. Dave Collins pointing out some kind of questions there. I agree with that stuff. So you divide 334,000 by the 14,000 deaths, and how much is that? I mean, I'm kind of a bit slow on that now. I'm kind of streaming, but if you can calculate that, it's probably not actually all that much, or is it? I don't know. Anyway, but then you have to keep in mind that, yeah, it's 334 diagnosed cases, but I mean, what is it? 2 times as much as that, or 3 times probably, of like cases that are just out there. So that makes the percentage even lower. I don't know. There are questions around this. But then 14 times more people died in Italy. And if you want to say Italy had vaccines or tuberculosis or whatever, then you have to talk about Spain, figure out Spain. You have to address if you're going to make a theory, I think as well as asking questions, legit questions, oh, that's a bit of a hole, and that's strange or whatever, you also have to be working on the Italy thing and the Spain thing. You have to work on the other side and kind of, I suppose, as Alan Forer was doing there, trying to explain that. But again, keeping an open mind, in the same way as the people who believe the official narrative have to accept that anything could be possible here. The people who are very skeptical kind of have to say, I mean, it could just be quite a dangerous health crisis that we have in our hands, as well. Just like Morgoth's review said, I don't know. I don't really know fully, but I'm looking into it. I'm thinking about it. I'm trying. I'm giving Dave big attention here. I'm kind of, I'm simping here for Dave, but unless there's unique strains of varying strengths in different regions, but I have no hard evidence of this. Yeah, maybe there's that. I don't know. Maybe it's different healthcare systems. Maybe it is all fake. I don't know, but just we should. It's more. I'm not saying what to think or what to not think. It's just maybe how to go about questioning this stuff in a way that kind of is solid, and just that doesn't bring other questions, tangential or not tangential, but parallel questions into kind of disrepute. You don't want to do that because we need reputation going forward. I think that's it. That kind of is for all the waffling I've did, as someone said earlier. That's the thing. We need to keep. It's very, very important to keep a good, solid reputation intact going forward. That doesn't mean pandering. It just means being sensible. Computing forever has to go. Take it easy. See ya. Thanks for watching and everything. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it for me. I mean, what else have I got here? I'm just looking. Oh yeah, so I was going to mention Paddy Cosgrave. He's doing. Some people say he's trolling. He's the Web Summit guy. He's trolling the establishment meaninglessly. To kind of the same people who say Leo's playing a blinder despise Paddy Cosgrave. So he's a kind of reasonably well-to-do guy, and he obviously can get a lot of things done. He's a mover and a shaker, right? And he's basically ribbing the government on this stuff, doing exactly the opposite of saying they're playing a blinder. He is both, as far as I can see, maybe I'm the ass kisser here, but he's kind of supporting the HSE, the work of the nurses and doctors, of course, but seems to be critical of the government at every step, critical for this reason and that reason, and just kind of putting it on them. And people are like, why would you do this at this time? Why don't you just shut up, Paddy Cosgrave, and all of this? And it's like, well, no. Like, even if the government were doing a good job, which I don't think they are, wouldn't it make more sense as kind of somewhat kind of subjects of the government, unfortunately, that it kind of is like that? Wouldn't it do better to be putting pressure on them to say you're not doing a good job and you need to do better and you're weak in this regard and this regard and this is disgrace and you're completely inept on this and you need to move on this and you need to do better and you're lying about this and this isn't true, and surely you should be taking that approach hardcore. I mean, why not? Like, even if you're doing it to too much of an extent, it's like, why not? Well, like, what are you going to do? Hurt their feelings, or what is the drawback to doing that? Can anyone argue? Right? These people are in positions of power and privilege and government, basically, right? There is no drawback. Is Chopper saying goodbye or saying, oh, he's clapping? But yeah, there's no drawback to it. That's what the people who are saying, you're playing a blinder, Leo, oh my God, I'm crying my eyes out, should be like, no, we need more masks. We need more this. We need more that. They have this many ventilators in this country. The percentage we have is lower for this. That needs to be fixed right now. You should be doing this. You said we have enough masks. Our nurses are crying out for, I think it's called PPE, yeah, personal protective equipment. Here's evidence that they're crying out for it. But Wet Chopper says, where would I go? I know, what would you be doing? Like, you really. But it's like, you should be taking that approach. And anyone who's not, I just think, is pathetic. These regime lickers. Why would you do that? Why would you do that at all? What would possess you to speak up to power or kiss up to power like that? I mean, I could see why in a way, but like, if anyone decent, why would you do that? Cosgrave is obviously in a position of influence. He's a high agency and all that kind of stuff. He's probably well enough to do and everything else, whatever, right? But he's clearly using that position to further, and people say he's trolling, he's just trying to stir shit and all of this. No, because you strip away the bluster and the hyperbole, or maybe the kind of the whatever it is, the messing a little bit, the provocativeness. Ultimately, he's trying, and he's trying to improve the situation, right? Put pressure on people to improve the situation. It's ridiculous, and I stand with him 100% on this stuff for what he's doing. I mean, what's the incentive for him to raise his brand, to get attention, to just spend his time messing? Or no, because, and the other thing is, he is following it up with actions. He's trying himself to make connections to bring it in, even with the Chinese state, apparently, or something like that, which you could question, whatever they, put dogs in frying pans or whatever, right? Which is a video that's disturbed me a lot recently. It's been going around Twitter. Is like a Chinese, all these videos of Chinese people being cruel to animals. There was one of a dog recently. I just keep seeing it, and it's like, oh lads, I can't like watch it at all. Like, it's really bad. But that's not the point. The point is we want to get masks to our nurses and doctors and all healthcare professionals. We want to give them as much as we can. And of course, when these HSE, the video is harsh viewing. Oh, sorry, I thought you meant my video. I'm just going to make myself bigger there so you don't have to look at the screen. But that, like, what was I trying to say? Oh, yeah. So clearly, Ver Adker and the guy from the HSE, the like director of the HSE, whatever. And then there's the other guy, I think his name is Paul. I don't really know or particularly care who these people are. But these HSE people who come out and give the kind of press conference and whatever, right? Why would you give them praise? Why would you not just roast them, basically? You know, because you could say one thing about roasting an individual nurse. Well, okay, she's trying her hardest, right? And I suppose you could argue these guys, Tony Holohan. Why would you kiss Holohan's Holohan? Like, you know, why would you do him that favor? And Paul Reed as well. Why? It's like, yeah, you wouldn't want to just abuse a nurse or a doctor. Not abuse, but like to hold them to task, you know, put pressure on them. Yes, they're just people doing their job, but these guys are at the top. They're at these press conferences. Their job is to weather these things and to be under that kind of scrutiny and pressure. And yes, they should personally be like, your name is on the block here and you're not doing good enough, right? That's what you would have in, that's a better incentive than any. That's probably the only one that these guys, and I'm sure they're trying in their own way, but I mean, would that make them do a better job or a worse job or the same? I would say better. I'd say in game theory terms, almost certainly make them do better. It's just annoying. Adrian Walsh says it's political positioning. It is, and there's kind of weird signaling going on. I'm not a fan at all. So anyway, did I have much else on that? There was a funny meme. Where is it? Here. Oh yeah, Connor Fitzgerald. Just Leo's playing a blinder hue. Couldn't agree more. NPC face. What else do I have? I don't know. I might start losing you now. I don't know if you're into it, but just this. There's a few tweets here that I found interesting. Just sparked a few thoughts. Is like, now we know who the essential workers are: cleaners, care workers. Sorry, now I'm just gonna make sure my screen is shared with you. No, it isn't. It is now. Now we know who the essential workers are: cleaners, care workers, nurse, all these types of people, right? The list goes on. Did you notice one group is missing? Answer: the 1% richest, right? And some people might say, oh, that's just leftist stuff or whatever. But it's like, the general point I want to make is just that capitalism and liberalism, two inextricably linked things, are really like, you know, this is a shit test for them if there ever was one. It's the biggest shit test for them, let's just say, in a little while. And, you know, that kind of speaks to my earlier point about the skepticism, maybe what I consider the over-the-top desperate skepticism, we'll say, right? Is that, what, you know, there's a big point to be made from a nationalist stand or viewpoint here, an anti-capital, anti-liberal, pro-nation, you could use, I don't want to use the word insular, but a more kind of conservative point of view to be made throughout this whole thing and after it. And also from an anti-capitalist, kind of slightly leftist perspective, it really is being shaken to its foundations here. And why would we just be off in the woods being like, it's just the flu, even though maybe it kind of is more than that. It was started by this person or that person, because I kind of read it somewhere, but ultimately you don't know, right? Why would you not just go, okay, we'll keep an open mind and keep questioning it. When new things come out, take them as they come, for sure. But like, as it happens, like, we'll just take it as a pandemic that's happening. And ultimately, no matter what its origins or whatever, it is a thing. Or even if you don't agree with the over-the-top response, whatever. But there's just a big nationalist case to be made against this. Why would you just pretend it away, even though it kind of is there, I think. And there's, you know, there's this big arena to get into here. And I'll just make the point, I wouldn't get into the arena for no reason if it was all fake and if I was convinced of that. I'm not being cynical. I'm saying I both believe it's true, and because I believe it largely true, that's all the more reason to not walk off into the woods on your own with this kind of highly dubious set of theories that like are pretty loose. Like, you know, why would you not just say, okay, we're in the arena, we're saying we don't know certain things, we're saying we're skeptical of things, but we are in the arena here from a point of view and we're not just sitting it out. We're not just taking our ball and kind of going home. While people are making, people from this kind of way out there, more left point of view, are in the arena making their points, making their case in this courtroom that is this pandemic. I made this point here is that allegedly, I hope this isn't untrue, but American companies denying workers paid sick leave, McDonald's 500,000 workers or whatever. Someone's asking me about beds. Okay, I don't know. I'll come back and figure it out afterwards. But there's, workers not getting sick leave, right? And the point I made here is just generally speaking, if slaves were sick, so like transatlantic slavery, Arab slavery, whatever, right? Sometimes they would just kill like lame workers or whatever. But often they would, because they had their slaves, they would feed them and give them medicine and have a place to sleep with their families and stuff like that, right? And if they fell ill for a little while, the owner would provide food, shelter, and medicine as usual until they get better and they go back to working. And then even cattle are fed and treated. So if you had a draft animal that carries carts or something, right? If it fell sick and it couldn't carry the cart for a while, you would give it oats or whatever, right? You would feed it and you'd water it and you'd give it shelter and insofar as it needs it, and medicine treatment. You would do that for cattle, for chickens, right? For horses or whatever. But these workers are being treated worse than slaves and livestock by some of the world's richest companies. That like your workers, you couldn't just say you're sick for a while. We have so many assets. Yeah, sure, have sick pay. You're sick. Basically, you're our wage slave. So wouldn't we look after you? But they won't even look after their wage slaves like you would a straight up slave. It's despicable. And there's a lot of arguments to be made here. There's arguments to be made about borders and all sorts of things, right? But if you're determined, not just saying I have a problem with it, it might be fake, here's some evidence. But if your constant determination, your instinct all the time is to just run headlong down, it's fake, you're kind of running away from the arena a little bit, right? And I've made that point. I wonder how many people agree or disagree with me. The airline industry calling for 50 billion in assistance. Again, we have leftists making some arguments. You can agree with them or not, saying, funny, these are funny. I think you will agree. Just in airline industry, so Boeing is calling for 50 billion in assistance, right? As are like banks and the treasury getting trillions of injections or whatever, right? And people have, to the Boeing thing, they're like, have they thought about getting a higher paid job? If they can afford Starbucks, they don't need handouts. They should pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Have they tried their bootstraps? All of these points, putting capitalism and liberalism on blast in this situation, it's there to be done, and really open borders and this globalism and kind of anti-natalism, all of these things can be put on blast. And I don't want to be around the corner with my head in the sand for no reason, based on a loose set of kind of inferences. What else? What was I going to say? There was another point there. Oh yeah, this is just a side point I have here. Do any of you get this feeling that like in normal times, in normal kind of more, let's say pronatal times or kind of traditional times and closed borders, where there's a stable population set or whatever, a thing like this would happen, it would be half dealt with. People will die, inevitably. Some people will die. There'll be a big crash in the economy, maybe like we've never seen before. But then the kind of sun would emerge on the other side. And because there's this massive lack of labor, but then conditions have gotten better and things are improved, they'd be trying to drag people out for work and get things going and all hands on deck and all of this going on. But I get this kind of feeling that when this does end eventually, you can't just bring in the labor from abroad and, who's having kids anyway. And this is kind of weird bleakness to the idea that there won't be, or put it this way, a lot of people have speculated that, like, yes, everybody being at home, you could expect a Christmas baby boom. But then you have, for example, Pornhub giving free porn to like access or accounts or something to Italians, which is just, make what you will of that. But it's weird, and through the modern kind of, I'm not like to make an argument against contraceptives here or anything, but just that kind of stuff, abortions, porn, atomization, could kind of almost like stop the baby boom that would have been. And, the idea that you would emerge from this awful recession, worse than a recession, this hardcore thing, And yeah, people aren't day dating, so people are actually self-isolated alone for a large case. But before, it would be, a couple, a married couple, whatever, they'd be at home, but and also if they did have those kids, you know, they would. It's almost like they would coincide. You would have the babies being born in Christmas, but at the same time, the economy, or whatever you want to call it, the society itself is over the worst of it. Let's just say they come up with the what's it called, hydroxychloroquine. Um, they come up with that, and it actually works. So we actually stop the pandemic kind of in its tracks. But there's just big flaming crater left in the actual society and the economy, and even in people's psyches, a little bit of national or global trauma about this, because everything's up and tits up, basically, right? But someone's saying, can we get rid of chit chat? Am I chit chatting, or is it someone else? Anyway, so yeah, maybe I'm LARPing here, but the idea that the economy and society itself would kind of come out the other side. When the storm lifts, there's a feeling of elation, almost like, as we get towards the other end of this, and that would probably coincide with the baby boom, and it would kind of be this almost, I don't know, phoenix from the ashes kind of moment of joy and of rebirth and of renewal. But it's kind of like, well, in our society, what comes out of this, really? Maybe it's a bit of a black pill thought. Like, I do want to get to the other side of this, and I hope it'll be a joyous and good occasion to reconnect with people and, socially get close, opposed to social distancing. But it's just, someone says hello from the Bay Area, California, Jacqueline Tackerberry. Nice one. Hi. I've never been. I'm sure it's very nice. That's a San Fran kind of area, something like that, as far as I know. As far as I've seen on the TV. Chit Chat is a person in the chat itself. I thought it was something else. But yeah, it's just this idea of a kind of, as bad as this is, it could be a kind of a reset, a renewal, a rebirth, a renaissance, and a kind of you come out of it the other side and you do go, yeah, we are going to be, it doesn't have to be crazy, like radical right-wing stuff, but just we're going to be a bit more nationalist. We're going to look after ourselves now a little bit and grow ourselves as a people and all this kind of stuff. But it's like the hands we're in at the moment, and probably will be in, you don't see much chance for that. And that's why I think it's crucial, again, to return to my point, to be in the arena. You have to be there making your case for what comes out of this, as opposed to just looking back and saying it's all fake, none of it is real. I don't know. But I'm not against skepticism, of course. I just need to reiterate. So what have we got there? I think that's about it for me, basically. Anyone have any questions in the chat or points they want to make? I'm still not finished my cider, so you know what I'm saying. Let's check the death count while we're at it, or the kind of the ongoing telescreen here that we're all a little bit glued to. 335,000 cases diagnosed or confirmed or whatever. I'm interested in the US one because the number changes pretty regularly, strangely enough, throughout the day. New cases. Where's the US? Oh, there it is. Sorry, on top. 8,000. So the US is going to blow up now. Is it just oh yeah, so someone says a global currency reset. I do entertain the idea, by the way, just so people know, of a lot of people speculate, that, this whole system is built on debt and all of this kind of stuff, this whole kind of global economic system, and at some point it has to collapse. 2008 was a false start, but at some point it has to collapse. Excuse me. And that maybe when this happens, you have to kind of, scratch your chin and think, maybe this is it. I mean, if I were trying to bring it down in a controlled fashion, I suppose I would release a pandemic. I would release a pandemic, and then everybody would accept the lower living standards, basically the going down many ranks, right? Because they would go, well, it just happened. It just was what it was. We're all scared. We just want to stay alive. And they would also be at home and kind of de-socialized and all of that stuff, right? That theory, it's a bit out there, whatever, but it kind of, it's not beyond me entertaining it at all, to be honest. It really isn't. I mean, such things have happened. Nothing like that has ever happened before, but like, it would be easily doable, for one. and it would make sense instead of having if the kind of global, globalist kind of algorithm was saying, listen, we're a couple of years away here from like overturned cars on the streets, Molotov cocktails worldwide, total chaos, and that can't happen, right? We want to let this thing down in a controlled fashion where we're in charge of it. I'm open to the idea of that, but even if that were the case, that still wouldn't mean the virus and the health crisis isn't real. That all those people dying in Italy would still be happening, and we should probably, even under those circumstances, still kind of have the same concerns. But the point is, I can't prove that. I can't prove it was that thing, which I'm happy to entertain. I can't prove that. I'm just sitting here talking into a microphone, drinking a pint of cider. There's only so much I know. There's only so much anyone knows. And it would be good to find out, and maybe with time, who knows. But as of now, I obviously can't prove that. So there's no point in me going around the place with this kind of maybe arrogance of like being like, this is what it is. Because it's like, I don't know that. I don't know that that's it at all. I've reason to like have the notion or the suspicion or something like that, but I've really have no reason to believe it, actively believe it. So do I need to be going around calling other people sheeple or telling people they shouldn't, wash their hands so much, or telling people that they shouldn't isolate a bit and be on the cautious side, or that people don't need to be worried, old people aren't going to die, young people aren't going to get their lungs burned out and wrecked? And should I be kind of putting myself in that position where I'm telling people all these things against everything else they're being told, when I don't know at all? Like, you know what I mean? It's easily as likely that it's a pandemic. And that's the other question I would ask of people, is like, for a person who says it was released, I'm telling you, I'm so strong on this, I think I really know, you know what I mean? It's like the question would be, for that person, very simple question. Here's what I would say. Do you think a pandemic can happen? And then they would go into this thing of, hey, look at this, it shows it's Agenda 201 or whatever, right? It's like, yeah, no, we can have that discussion, and you may well be right. But just in a general sense, do you think a pandemic can happen? And if they don't say no, if they say, well, yes, a pandemic can happen, then my response would be, well, surely you can entertain, given everything that we see and the Occam's razor a little bit, that like, then maybe a pandemic can just happen. So maybe you should just kind of, maybe communicate a little bit on that level while expressing doubts. And again, I'm not telling you communicate any way you want, but it's just like, I'm speaking to nationalists, and it's not a cult or anything like that. But just, if there is a nationalist out there who generally agrees with me and is interested to know my point of view or my advice or the way I would go on something, I'm just giving you where I come from. Think what you like, believe what you like, right? But that's all. And the point is, I'm not on some like Michael Shermer, Richard Dawkins kind of like, oh, this is all fake or whatever, these flat earthers or something. I'm not being glib like that, or like in this quest of like material truth or whatever, this kind of awfully cynical quest like those guys do. I'm not doing that. It's not purely for that reason, the pursuit of objective truth and provable whatever. No, it's because it comes with a cost, and it's an opportunity forgone of something else that to me matters, really matters. So I think maybe I've made my point there. I do want to go through the chat, or if it is just a flu, go into a hospital and hug a coronavirus victim. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go hug a coronavirus person. And obviously, you're not going to be probably not going to be comfortable to do that. I don't know. It's just my point on that is made, I think. It's just, I really want to get into the more solid stuff. I know Dave was in the chat earlier, Dave Cullen, Computing Forever. He streamed with John Waters last night, I think, and I haven't seen that yet. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. And what I love about the lads, Dave Cullen and John Waters and people like that, is that, sorry, burping into the mic again. I should really use my mute button for this stuff. But is that people like that will happily say, the first question I have in terms of trusting where people are coming from is they say, I mean, there's only so much I know. There's so many different narratives and theories here. There's something to probably all of them a little bit, and it's worth exploring. When they say that, I go, cool. And from what I know, I've had a brief kind of, I've heard what that video was kind of about. maybe a skepticism of the idea of social isolation and the trauma built into that. And I haven't seen the video, so you go watch it yourself. I sure will. I probably watch it after this. I bet I'll lose loads of viewers now straight over to that. But it's completely fine. But talking about it with this kind of open mind, always open. Like I'm open to the skeptical arguments, but I'm also open to the other side, and I'm just being humble about it. And being able to look at the consequences of this enforced kind of social isolation over an extended period of time, whether or not it's worth it. The idea of freedom versus, some people dying. There's a legit question to that. It's like, well, how far do we go with that premise? If for the rest of our lives we knew there was some disease out there that would kill so many people, X amount of people, and we had to spend the rest of our lives, I'm going to dramatize the analogy even further. You have to spend the rest of your life in your house, in your pod. Or else when you go out, you'll spread it. You'll be contagious. And even if you don't get it, other people will get it. And X amount of people will die. So you have a responsibility to stay in your house forever. I mean, that just puts it in stark terms. You go, well, there is a point where, so I'm guessing from what I've heard, Dave and John are delving into those things, right? And maybe questioning, are these numbers biased by sampling kind of myopias? Is that what's kind of going on there? Questions about that, sure. What's the effect on that? What does this say about our society? What does it mean? All of this, keeping a mind open to the further out theories a bit as well, maybe, but staying in the game. Just stay in the game. Don't walk away into like, it's just like everything else. It's a crisis initiated and it's dumb us down and whatever. It's like, that's too easy. You have to argue further than that. You have to be broader than that and better than that. That's just how I feel. So back to chat. I have a joke about coronavirus, but you won't get it, Nimblehorse says. Some Osquelga name there, I can't really say. Lug is the first one. Too many egos at play in Irish nationalism. I mean, am I an ego in Irish nationalism? Possibly. Maybe I'm talking into a computer. Maybe I'm egotistical because I feel like I have to, think everybody should listen to me or something. Too many egos in Irish nationalism. I don't know. I kind of disagree. I mean, like to what end? Like to what detriment, or in what way? And I don't mean to be stirring drama in the chat here, but like, in what way are there too many egos? I mean, maybe there are. It takes, like, I know people, who are very talented in certain ways, that confident at broadcasting and very brave and very and not just in making videos, but in all sorts of ways. In whatever they do, they are a bit brash and they are a bit whatever, a bit egotistical. Maybe to some extent you kind of need a little bit of that to be able to do the other stuff, right? To have a pair of balls and to have the kind of the feeling of entitlement that I'm going to go forward and go for something. A bit of ego is fine, right? Someone says it's grifters that are particularly disgusting. I saw Betwixt made a video on grifting or something to do with the coronavirus. I know the person he was specifically referring to. I honestly don't know. I don't follow all of the other people in the Irish nationalist scene or anything. I watch some stuff here and there, but I don't know all the ins and outs of what's going on with people. To be honest, I don't want to say too much. I don't want to insult people to say that I don't watch them or something. But I don't pay so much attention to like big names or sorry, like YouTubers and all that stuff so much. But I mean, people taking donations, if that's what grifting is, if that's what you mean by grifting, or people mean when they say grifting, what's wrong with that? If you make videos, and I'm not saying people I don't do it, but like if you make videos every night of the week, or if you do that, then if you ask for donations, I'm sorry, I don't see what's wrong with that. I mean, I know the Ezra Levant model from Rebel Media was kind of grifting on steroids. Maybe stuff like that is a little bit, but just the idea of just asking for donations for work you do. I mean, it takes a bit of, you have to get some stuff to be able to make a video, and you have to think about it, and you have to put it together and spend time on it. Nobody's forcing people to watch it. It's like, oh, it's you're just on, you're lucky we watch or something like that. It's like, no one's being forced to watch. And I'm not saying I'm grateful for people who watch, but I'm just saying, And it's not even asking, it's not even putting a price on things, like putting. Sorry, I'm going to go to full screen now because I'm kind of done with that. It's not even putting a price on it, so it's like it's free. Actually, you can access it for free, but like if you want to make a donation, I would have thought that's pretty grand. Most people, like most things, if you read the Irish Times or watch a movie or something, you'll have to pay for it. You know, I would think that like giving it essentially for free and then putting a donation option there is like it's like, if that's grifting, then so is like going to see a movie in the cinema and paying for it. They're grifting at the box office, I would have thought. Garrod got me locked in a cell making me watch. Don't believe him. That's funny. I do actually kind of have a captive audience at the moment with this virus or whatever. People are kind of locked away a bit. Yeah, I kind of, there's a weird bit of me is that like I just kind of don't want to go, which is I'm still having my drink. I'm not really doing much else. Do you know what I mean? I was thinking of making a video of like I don't know if anyone's interested in this. It's really just a filler, not a filler video, but like a short video. I could even make this a list, but like a written list on Twitter or Telegram or something, like a list of like 20 or something or 30 of my favorite videos or podcasts. And I'm not talking about podcast pages with like I just got a text there. It's kind of funny. Sorry, but yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, not just different podcast pages, like the different types of like the whole podcast series, but just a specific a specific episode. Like this, not only is this a podcast I like to listen to in general, but this specific one is my favorite of the favorite, right? And then go to like, I like some random stuff like aviation. I'm like a complete like YouTube observer or whatever, but I like these aviation channels about different flight disasters or just about planes in general, or different like I like Bowden. I'm sure some of you know him. He has some good speeches, political speeches, and random just things that like I really would come back to and listen to again, or really found fascinating and interesting the first time, whether it's very serious and thoughtful stuff, or whether it's just kind of more entertainment. Just basically so that like instead of scrolling through something, if you have a bit of time in your hands, if you're laid off, if you're working from home, or if you're just spending more time indoors in the evening, trains. We have train YouTube here. I haven't actually gotten to it yet, but I'm sure I would watch it. I'd definitely watch it, train here and there, if there was one presented to me. Keith Woods has a new podcast series for €5 a month. That's well worth it. I mean, €5 a month. What's that? €1.20 a week. So that's like basically a couple of cents, like every day. It's very little. And look at the work he's put in for all his videos and stuff. That does take work. It takes sacrifice. I'm not saying he has a bad reputation or anything, but like putting himself out there, right? He's done a lot. Like it's not, you would pay €5 a month on so many things. And I know people are strapped at the moment, or will soon be. But like, I think there's so many worse ways you could spend your money, particularly if you're into this stuff. I think he was talking to Borzoi about stuff. I think I will sign up for that because I want to hear it. But yeah, so that should be an interesting conversation. Kai speeches get angry. Okay. Someone says to listen to those speeches of Kai Moros. I don't know who that is, but I'll have a look at it. Let me write it down. But yeah, that's what I kind of want to do. Sorry. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to end this one now, right? Because we've went on for a little bit. I don't want to end up at the point cutting into my beer money. You can have a few beers, have one less beer, and you can listen to Keith Woods. I'm kind of going to leave it there, but here's the thing, is that I have a couple of articles that I was going to go through, and they're both zero hedge. I'm a big fan of zero hedge. Someone says, watch the duping delight with some of these Irish grifters. It's grotesque. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't throw shade around the place. Like whatever, if it's necessary, I would. But like, What's blasphemous? Irish Fenian there. What's blasphemous? I've lost track of what I said. But yeah, yeah, the grifting thing and the the kind of drama and stuff. I don't know. I'm not too pushed at what people are doing. Like, unless someone's been terrible or something. Like, I criticize some people who have certain ideas earlier about things. You know, a little bit, like, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone specifically. And I'm willing to, if someone wants to come on and like argue those cases to me, they can, and it's not personal at all. It's fine. Like, not a big deal at all. Like, I don't know, this kind of a drama, kind of like criticism. I don't know who you're even specifically talking about. If you were talking about someone specific or a specific thing, then I could be like, whatever. But like this whole thing, there's awful this or that's around, and some of them are fakes, and some of them are attention seekers or egos. I don't know. If someone's making videos or being a political person or whatever, they're out there like doing their thing. Whatever, it's not my problem, basically. Yeah. So I was going to go through these 2 articles, but do you know what? A lot of people are gone now. It's pushing on 10 o'clock. I could just save them for another video and maybe go through them because they're quite long. And I could link these if you want to. Anybody who wants these articles linked and wants to read them yourselves, you can. One is so this is Zero Hedge. I think these were recommended highly to me by some good people. COVID-19 evidence over hysteria. So basically countering my argument a little bit, saying that evidence over hysteria. Apparently this is a good argument as to, and I haven't read it yet, as to why maybe it's a bit of hysteria. It's overdone. People, it's being overestimated, basically. And I'll actually add that to the chat right now. Or no, I'm not going to. You can find it, but I might make another video going over 2 of these. So I'll be looking at that, and I'll be looking at coronavirus, the catalyst for system failure. So this article takes a different perspective on it, which is what I'm talking about. You have this perspective, and you have that perspective. Now, I don't know either one for sure, but I'm definitely looking at both of them, thinking hard about it. Or I will be. Yeah, the catalyst for system failure. So looking over things like supply chain collapse and all of that kind of stuff. Oh, the cutting the beer money is blasphemous. Sorry, but yeah. What was I on about? So yeah, basically the supply chains collapsing and all of that. That's kind of the doomsday. It's coming. You know, it's very dangerous. And this one says it's a bit of hysteria. So you have 2 conflicting articles in a way. They're both, from what I'm told, are, you know, good, solid arguments and all of that. And like I said, as Morgoth's review said, to say I don't know is a big thing, but try to be clever about it. No, I know. Lug says, not talking about me. No, I'm not defending myself. I just mean for other people in general. Like, I don't know. Basically, it's just something I don't get into. I'm basically having no opinion on that. Plenty to be talking about. I don't like attracting thing, and it's detriment to cohesiveness. I don't know. I don't think we should all. You know, I like the bit of unity and whatever, but it's like, yeah, people do different things and behave in different ways. I don't know. It's not much I can say more than that. Chopper says RTE confirming staff member test positive. Damn. Angela Merkel's doctor has tested positive as well. So that's maybe a note to end on. No one say anything more than that. Yeah, if you, I don't know, I'll try to do a few more streams. I might come back to these 2 articles tomorrow. And what I want to do, I don't know if this is wrong or not, but to take both articles and actually not read them in advance. I actually just leave them and just open up a stream and just go through it. And you can kind of read it with me. I'll be reading it, reacting to it, kind of like initial thoughts, you know, that kind of way. Same way maybe you would be having at that point. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there, basically. And I don't have one of these buttons that says subscribe like on screen, but if you haven't, maybe go down and check. Doesn't take long. Where even is it? This is subscribe thing. I suppose I don't have it because it's my page. But yeah, just check. Maybe you're not. Maybe you thought you were, but you're not. Subscribe. I just think it's cool when I get a few subscribers. I know I'm kind of, you know, not speaking into the wilderness. Apparently giving it a like makes people watch it more or something like that. Share it online. And I suppose this is really like, you hear YouTubers saying it a lot, but I've discovered there's a reason for it. Would you believe? Hitting the bell as well as that, you will be notified when I do a video. So I suppose that would mean I have more people see it and watch it, which I would like for next time. So anyway, do all that if you haven't already, and I would appreciate it very much. Look after yourselves, and I'll talk to you soon. Take it easy. Bye.